Yellowstone wildfires in the previous century did not have an ecological tipping point because they might have burned a couple of trees or a couple of acres. During the summer of 1982, the Park Service screwed up and hired me to work on the 20-person Bison Hotshot crew stationed in Yellowstone. Most of our duties that summer were related to if you can't move it, paint it, or doing trail maintenance. We did go on a few wildfires in the surrounding area, but nothing in Yellowstone itself. In fact, we got 4 inches of snow on the 4th of July. Let's jump forward 6 years to the summer of 1988, one of the most dramatic years in the history of Yellowstone National Park. That year, the park experienced a series of wildfires so intense and widespread that they ultimately scorched over 1.2 million acres across the greater Yellowstone area, roughly 36% of the park itself. But the story did not begin in flames. It began with snow, or rather lack of it. The preceding winter had been unusually dry, and that set the stage. By spring, drought conditions had settled in. Then, as summer arrived, things only got worse. Yellowstone saw record low humidity, hot temperatures, and frequent windstorms, all combining to create perfect wildfire conditions. Despite that, at the start of the season, the National Park Service followed its natural burn policy, which allowed fires started by lightning to burn naturally unless they threatened human life or property. The first fire ignited on June 14th, sparked by a lightning strike near Storm Creek, just outside the park boundary. At that time, no one imagined the fire would be a precursor to the disaster ahead. Over the next several weeks, more than 50 separate fires ignited in and around Yellowstone, most of them from lightning. A few were caused by humans, though unintentionally. Initially, the fires were relatively small and slow moving, but by mid July, they began to merge and spread aggressively. On July 21st, winds picked up and the fires jumped natural barriers and began burning hotter and faster. That's when the tone of the response changed. What began as a relatively passive fire monitoring strategy turned into a full blown fire campaign. By early August, 7 major fires were tearing through the park. Some of the largest included the Shoshone Fire, Clover Mist Fire, and the notorious North Fork Fire, which would go on to burn the most acreage, over 410,000 acres, on its own. The firefighting effort grew to be one of the largest in U.S. history at the time. At its peak, more than 25,000 people were involved, including personnel from the National Park Service, U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, military units, and even volunteers. Aircraft were constantly in the sky. Helicopters, air tankers, and smoke jumpers were deployed around the clock. Bulldozers, fire engines, and hand crews worked to dig fire line and protect key structures. The military even sent soldiers from Fort Lewis and Fort Riley who were trained in fire line safety and deployed into the field to support exhausted firefighters. Still, despite all that effort, nature held the upper hand. The fires would sometimes move 10 miles in a single day, driven by erratic winds and fueled by decades of dry forest debris. The infamous day was Black Saturday on August 20th, when firestorms roared across Yellowstone, driven by 80-mile-per-hour gusts. That day, over 150,000 acres burned, and flames got dangerously close to landmarks like Old Faithful, pictured here. Fire crews raced to protect visitor centers, ranger stations, historic lodges, and employee housing. In some areas, sprinkler systems were installed on roofs. The Old Faithful Inn was successfully saved, although flames came within just a few hundred yards. The fires finally came to an end not because of firefighting success, but because of a dramatic change in weather. In mid September, snowstorms rolled in and smothered the flames. The fire season was officially declared over in late September after a long, exhausting, and emotionally draining summer. In the end, no park employees or visitors lost their lives, although sadly, there was one firefighter fatality. While the damage looked catastrophic, millions of trees reduced to blackened sticks, ash covering once lush meadows, Yellowstone began to show signs of rebirth surprisingly quickly. Ecologically speaking, the 1988 fires turned out to be a pivotal moment. Many scientists now view the fires not as a tragedy, but as natural and necessary process in Yellowstone's forest cycle. Lodgepole pines, one of the dominant species in the park, have cones that open up under extreme heat only, in fact, trigger their regeneration. Within a year, seedlings were already sprouting, and by the next summer, wildflowers blanketed many of the burnt landscapes. That being said, the fires did cause significant short-term disruptions. Wildlife patterns changed, tourism dropped, and the park's infrastructure faced major threats. However, because of the park's natural features, geysers, rivers, and valleys were largely unaffected. The fires also had lasting impacts on fire management. The National Park Service revised its approach, blending natural fire ecology with stricter guidelines for suppression when fires threaten human life or infrastructure. In short, the summer of 1988 tested Yellowstone like never before. It was loud, smoky, chaotic, and frightening, but it was also a profound moment of transportation. The fires shaped not just the land, but the way we think about wilderness.